Okay, I'm still Matt Quail.
And I'm still Brendan Humphreys.
And we're still senior software engineers at Atlassian.
Although that may not be the case after these presentations. But so today, well, actually now we're going to look at some rules in software engineering and why we think you should break them. So all engineering disciplines are kind of tough, but software engineering is uniquely tough. It's uniquely tough because there's very few hard rules or laws and constraints that you have to really follow as a practitioner. If you consider, by comparison, civil engineering, when they want to build this building, this is the Dubai Tower, this is where all your petrol dollars or gas dollars go. When you're designing this building, you really have to obey the laws of gravity, thermodynamics, statics and strength of materials, and they're all really, really well understood. We've been building buildings for thousands of years. In the world of software, we've only been building software for 50 or 60 years, so there just aren't physical constraints and there aren't really good laws to guide developers. Maybe one day, or in time, what will emerge is a grand unified theory of programming, but it hasn't happened yet. And in the meantime, what you get is complete license to be very flexible in how you implement things, and that can go very, very bad for you. So we're kind of in this dark ages of programming, and in response to that, what you get are these experts who preach to you rules, and these rules often get repeated and repeated until they become a mantra, and engineers start to follow them kind of blindly. So let's have a look at 5 of these that we think you really should break.
So on to our first rule. This mouthful of an acronym stands for do the simplest thing that could possibly work. And it was originally coined in that form from some of the founders of the Agile movement. This is a rule you should break. The problem with this rule is it's too easy to misapply. It's too easy to confuse simple with easy.
In fact, some of the code we've seen over the years makes me think that this rule should be restated as do the stupidest thing that could possibly work and do it at every opportunity.
So when this rule was created, there was actually a really important rider or subclause that I think if you add it, it actually makes the rule work, which is do the simplest thing that could possibly work, but no simpler. Once you add that, it changes the whole focus of this rule and reveals the true intent of the rule, which is you need to produce a functional solution that actually works, that is simple.
Okay, so on to our second rule that we're going to cut down here, and that's the rule that you should design for reuse. Now, this is totally flawed because it implies that you know the future, that you can really be a fortune teller. When you're designing software, it's usually about modeling a solution to a problem, and it's usually, or almost always, modeling a specific solution to a specific problem. Now, you should always be designing a specific for the specific problem at hand and not trying to anticipate, as Donald Rumsfeld would call them, the unknown unknowns.
Now, we're not saying that reuse is bad. Reuse is awesome. You can get huge cost savings and huge time savings by doing reuse. What we're saying is design is not the activity you use to achieve reuse.
What you really need to do is you need to build the same software 3 or 4 times and then, with the benefit of hindsight, extract out or look for the commonality and extract it out as a library. But only once you've implemented something 3 or 4 times.
So we don't think you should design for reuse. We think you should refactor for reuse.
Again, at its worst, I've seen developers have this as their #1 design principle. They are set a task of building a bit of functionality to do X, and they go about solving world hunger in software. I'm sure you've got examples yourself, actually.
Okay, so let's go on to rule number 3. Only hire the smartest engineers. We don't think you should only hire the smartest engineers. What we're not saying is you should only hire the dumbest engineers either. What we are saying is that smartest is not even close to the only criteria you should use when putting together a software team. The reason we want to talk about this rule is it has to do with the curse of acceptable complexity, what we call the curse of acceptable complexity. Acceptable complexity works like this. Everyone has a different level of complexity that they can handle. And in a group of people, the complexity that that group can handle is the minimum complexity that any one of the people in that group can handle. Then if everyone in the group has a very high level of complexity which they can handle, the minimum level of complexity of that group is actually quite high, and the solution that that group might put together will tend to upwards towards that minimum level of complexity. So with a smart group of people only applying their smartness, you'll often end up with solutions that maybe not a lot of other people in other teams or coming into that team might be able to handle.
So the message here is that smart is good, but smart is only necessary, it's not sufficient. You need people who can talk to the masses, people who are grounded and are able to communicate with mere mortals.
So what we say is when you're hiring people and putting together a team, just don't have the rule only hire the smartest people. Think about putting together a well-rounded team.
So moving on to the next rule that we'd like to shoot down, and this is quite an old rule in software engineering, and that is premature optimization is the root of all evil. Now this rule's kind of clever in its crafting because it's got that inbuilt protection mechanism. It has, by definition, if you're prematurely optimizing, then you're doing it too early. But what Knuth actually meant when he coined this is that as you're coding, you shouldn't be staring at the code trying to figure out little clever ways to make it go a little bit faster by, say, unrolling loops or inlining methods.
And why we think you shouldn't follow this rule is that it's often used as an excuse to not consider performance at all. And that's actually the opposite of what we would recommend. We recommend you should always consider performance.
In fact, we'd say that a good engineer is always mindful of performance considerations. A good engineer has an understanding of complexity analysis. They understand the complexity profile or the performance profile of their data structures and their algorithms. They're going to build systems to measure and track performance on a project as soon as possible, and they're going to make decisions at every step of the design and implementation process with performance factors in consideration.
So on to our last rule, rule number 5. The customer is always right. Hello, customers out there, we disagree with this rule. So unfortunately, customers can't actually always be right, because if you have two customers with two conflicting things that they want, then one of them is, or maybe both, is going to be wrong. And sometimes, customers just can't describe or put together what it is they want. And a classic example would be something like this. So if you try too hard to please everyone, you'll end up paralyzed and the quality of your software will suffer. We want you to respect us in the morning. And for this relationship to work, we need to say no occasionally.
Well, we do have the Atlassian value, don't fuck the customer, so that kind of fits in there. But anyway.
Yep.
So as an alternative to this rule, we would say, instead of always treating the customer as being right, build a relationship with your customer that's based on transparency and consistency in decision making.
So don't necessarily give them what they want, but definitely give them what they need and delight the customer. We believe this rule actually will better achieve a better relationship with your customer than really saying the customer is always right. So summing up, we've taken do the simplest thing that could possibly work and added back the important right, but no simpler, please. Instead of design for reuse, you should refactor for reuse. Instead of only hiring the smartest engineers, try to hire smart but well-rounded engineers. Instead of premature optimization being the root of all evil, we think the good engineers are always mindful of performance when they're building software. And instead of the customer always being right, we think you should delight your customer with
transparency, and consistency.
So there are our 5 rules we've taken down and 5 rules we've added, but we'd like to add one bonus extra rule.
And that is, be wary of rules in software engineering. In this industry, it's so new, it's so young, that you really should be taking every rule with a grain of salt. You should be challenging any received wisdom you get from books or thought leaders. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?
All right. Well, I think that's...
There you go. I said I'd give you a lolcat. You got a lolcat. You wanted a lolcat.
I think this is pretty much the last presentation. So thank you, everyone, for coming to Atlassian Summit. I don't know about you, but I've had an awesome time. It's been great.
Woo!
It's not the last thing? Okay. Yeah.